everybody, today's lesson is going to be focusing on narrative structure. So we're going to be introducing the story mountain structure that we're going to be following working towards our narrative assessment. And we're particularly looking at how to write the build-up section of a narrative, where we sort of plant the seed that something perhaps might end up going wrong in our main section of our story, in our problem. We sort of plant seeds in the reader's mind that something is going to happen. As it says there, then you'll of course need your English book, you'll need a pen to write with, and the sheet entitled Shock versus Tension attached to the assignment on Teams. Okay, so the structure of a narrative then is so important. It holds together all of your ideas. Now when, particularly in exam conditions, we've got all of these ideas, settings, characters, endings racing around in our head, the story mountain structure really helps you to draw your ideas together and to form a logical and well-structured narrative that the reader can follow. So the story mountain then is probably one of the most common structures to a narrative. It's got 5 sections, and if you wrote 5 extended paragraphs, that usually amounts to around 2 sides of A4, which is what we are looking at for our narrative assessment. So the 5 sections then are the opening, starting at the beginning, which is always helpful, the build-up that we're looking at today, the problem or the main event, the resolution, how everything is solved to give the reader that satisfaction that everything is sorted out, and then of course the ending. So we've looked at 8 ways to start a story and how you make an effective opening. Today we're going to look at how we create tension and suspense in our build-up that makes the reader want to read on and to find out what happens in our problem section, in our main event. So can we pause the video here then? Let's get down the date of completion, and our title is Narrative Assessment Structure. Make sure you underline it. Let's keep our books nice and neat. Okay, can we have a side heading, the build-up then, and let's have a look at what it says about the build-up. Can you copy down these few lines underneath your side heading, please? So it says, writing to create tension is very important, as it leads the reader to the climax of the story. They should not give away the main elements of the story, as the reader should want to read on to discover what happens next. So pause the video here, let's get this down in our books. As I said earlier then, we're not giving away any of the main events, we're saving that for our next paragraph, but you need to really know how to effectively create tension. Now I've got a video next that hopefully outlines to you how we create tension effectively. The sound isn't great, so if you'd rather follow the link in the description to watch it, then come back to this video, that is absolutely fine.
Monsters, fountains of blood, and things jumping out from every corner. But as classic horror author H.P. Lovecraft wrote, the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. And writers harness that fear not by revealing horrors, but by leaving the audience hanging in anticipation of them. That is, in a state of suspense. The most familiar examples of suspense come from horror films and mystery novels. What's inside the haunted mansion? Which of the dinner guests is the murderer? But suspense exists beyond these genres. Will the hero save the day? Will the couple get together in the end? And what is the dark secret that causes the main character so much pain? The key to suspense is that it sets up a question, or several, that the audience hopes to get an answer to, and delays that answer while maintaining their interest and keeping them guessing. So what are some techniques you can use to achieve this in your own writing? Limit the point of view. Instead of an omniscient narrator who can see and relay everything that happens, tell the story from the perspective of the characters. They may start off knowing just as little as the audience does, and as they learn more, so do we. Classic novels like Dracula, for example, are told through letters and diary entries where characters relate what they've experienced and fear what's to come. Next, choose play similar roles in limiting visibility and restricting characters' movements. That's why Victorian London is such a popular setting. And even ordinary places and objects can be made sinister, as in the Gothic novel Rebecca, where the flowers at the protagonist's new home are described as blood red. 3. Play with style and form. You can build suspense by carefully paying attention not just to what happens, but how it's conveyed and paced. Edgar Allan Poe conveys the mental state of the narrator in The Telltale Heart with fragmented sentences that break off suddenly. And other short declarative sentences in the story create a mix of breathless speed and weighty pauses. On the screen, Alfred Hitchcock's cinematography is known for its use of extended silences and shots of staircases to create a feeling of discomfort. 4. Use dramatic irony. You can't just keep the audience in the dark forever. Sometimes, suspense is best served by revealing key parts of the big secret to the audience, but not to the characters. This is a technique known as dramatic irony, where the mystery becomes not what will happen, but when and how the characters will learn. In the classic play Oedipus Rex, the title character is unaware that he has killed his own father and married his mother. But the audience knows, and watching Oedipus gradually learn the truth provides the story with its agonizing climax. And finally, the cliffhanger. Beware of overusing this one. Some consider it a cheap and easy trick, but it's hard to deny its effectiveness. This is where a chapter, episode, volume, or season cuts off right before something crucial is revealed, or in the midst of a dangerous situation with a slim chance of hope. The wait, whether moments or years, makes us imagine possibilities about what could happen next, building extra suspense. The awful thing is almost always averted, creating a sense of closure and emotional release. But that doesn't stop us from worrying and wondering the next time the protagonists face near certain disaster.
Okay, so there were some clips there in that video from the director Alfred Hitchcock. The final scene there with the lady in the shower is from a film called Psycho. Great film if you ever get the chance to watch it. And he is known as the master of suspense. So he famously said there is no terror in the bang, only the anticipation of it. And that's what you want to create in your story, the anticipation that something is about to happen. Now I've got a clip from an interview with Alfred Hitchcock. Again, the sound isn't wonderful. This video clip is from an interview a long time ago, so I'll post a link in the description to the interview, but the sound isn't great in the interview itself either. So let's see what he says about how you create suspense really well in a story.
People are sitting around a table talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to sleep. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table and will go off in 5 minutes. But the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information that in 5 minutes' time that bomb will go off. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working. Now the only difference is, well, I've been guilty of in the picture sabotage of making this error, but I've never made it since. The bomb must never go off.
Okay, so what he was saying there then, if you couldn't quite figure it out, is that if two people are sitting at a table having a discussion for, say, 5 minutes or a paragraph if you're writing it down, and then suddenly at the end of that a bomb goes off and there's catastrophe and a huge explosion, the audience have received shock there, but they haven't experienced any suspense. Because if we as a reader or as a watcher don't know that there's a bomb under the table, then all we get is the shock of that bomb going off. So Alfred Hitchcock suggests that if you tell the audience or show the audience in a film that there's a bomb under the table, when these people are then talking for 5 minutes about something mundane, the whole time the audience are on the edge of their seat wondering when this bomb is going to go off, and that is how you create suspense. So let's have a look at how we do that in writing then. This is where you need the shock versus tension sheet. So we're going to have a look at the downfall of shock and then the benefits of creating tension. So this says, a young boy with dishevelled hair walked down the street in the midst of a downpour. He bowed his head against the battering wind and watched his feet splash along the pavement. Suddenly, a strong hand clasped across his mouth from behind, and pain shot up his legs as his knees smashed against the concrete floor. Now, visually, you can see that that's a very, very short paragraph, but it creates this shock. We've got a final sentence starting with the adverb suddenly, and then the event is over almost as quickly as it began. We've got no investment in this young boy. We don't know anything about him. We had no crumbs that led a trail to suggest that anything was going to go wrong. So here we've got shock. So this doesn't create tension effectively because there's no description. There's no investment in the character. I don't particularly care that something bad has happened to him. I don't know who this character is. We've got no investment in it. We don't know where he's going. We've got no sense that something is going to go wrong. So there is no suspense in this paragraph. Let's have a look at the next paragraph then and see what we think about that. A young boy with dishevelled hair walked down the street in the midst of a downpour. He bowed his head against the battering wind and watched his feet splash along the pavement. He was alone and liked it this way. The tinny beats of his favourite song thumped into his ear. Out of the corner of his eye, he thought that a shape moved to the left of him. The boy stopped in his tracks and began to search the orange glow of the streetlights. Nothing. He removed one earbud from his ear to listen to the darkness and carried on. Before he reached the corner, he stopped to stare into his favourite shop window. He stared through the smeared glass and longed for a new pair of trainers. Behind his left shoulder, he saw the reflection ripple subtly as if in response to movement, but as he blinked, the movement was gone. The boy now removed his earphones and paused his music playlist, just in case. He felt a little unnerved, but no one would be awake at this time of night. The boy knew he was on the last stretch of road until he reached his street turning, so he quickened his pace. He hastened his footsteps. His hastened footsteps echoed across the streets, reverberating between buildings. In his rush, the boy tripped clumsily over the corner of a paving stone and stopped in his tracks to gather himself. He stopped, but the echoing footsteps continued. Suddenly, a strong hand clasped across his mouth from behind, and pain shot up his legs as his knees smashed against the concrete floor. Now, of course, visually straight away, this is a lot longer. This is a longer build-up section, but let's have a look at what is quite so efficacious about it. Why is it good at creating tension? So first of all, we've got more character development. We know a little bit more about him. We know he's going home. We know he's enjoying his feet splashing in the puddles. We know that he likes being alone. We know he likes listening to music. Then he's looking at trainers in a shop window, and we sort of feel this scene along with him. So he has something out of the corner of his eye, first of all, a shape. We've all seen something that isn't there in the dark. It's quite unnerving walking alone. So he stopped, looked around, and then he can't find anything. But he removes one earbud from his ear just so he can be a little bit more alert. Then he's looking into the shop window, and behind his left shoulder he thinks he sees the reflection move. So again, he turns around and there's nothing there. So this time he takes out both of his earphones and he doesn't play his music anymore. And we see that he starts to feel a little bit unnerved, but he knows no one's going to be awake at this time of night. Little does he know. Then, of course, he trips. He makes him a little bit more vulnerable, so he stops. But as he stops, the footsteps don't stop. And then that's when we know that there definitely is somebody there. And then suddenly, we've got something going wrong where he's grabbed from behind. Okay, so we've got this idea that there are little seeds planted along the way, little hints, subtle hints that something is about to go wrong. So then, on the sheet, tension, suspense, shock versus tension, you've got those two paragraphs, and underneath there is a sentence that I want you to finish. So the first one, the short one that was shock, it says the scene does not effectively build tension because. Now in your own words, I want you to finish that sentence. Don't forget, if you're typing into the sheet, you need to delete those lines before you type, otherwise your sheet is going to look very, very messy. If you're writing on the sheet, then you are fine to write on the lines, of course. So pause here and finish that first short task. The next section of the sheet then is looking at tension. So this time the sentence says, this scene does effectively build tension because. I want you to explain why, in your own words, this is good at building tension. Again, delete the lines first if you're typing into the sheet. As you can see, you've got a few more lines this time. Okay, I want you to give an extended answer here if you can. Why is this good at building tension? Okay, we've got some other tools then that we can use to build tension, and one of them is, of course, punctuation. I love complex punctuation. I think it's so important to get across the specific meaning of what you need. So let's have a look at how we can use it as an extra tool to build tension. So first of all, can you put the side heading building tension through punctuation? Don't forget to underline it. And then a little subheading underneath, ellipsis. So as you can see, there's an example of an ellipsis there. It's those three dots. I'm sure we've seen them before. So can you pause here and copy down those two headings? Okay, underneath then it says, in creative writing, the ellipsis functions to indicate that the narrative voice has trailed off and left a sentence or thought unfinished. An ellipsis is three dots, never more, never less. So an ellipsis then, if we use sort of a cliched way to describe it, is a little bit like a cliffhanger. Now obviously, as it said in the tension video that we watched earlier, cliffhangers can be cheesy, they're very overdone, and if it's something very obvious, it's a little bit of a gimmick. Something that we see in books and stories for really, really young children because it's exciting. But a good cliffhanger and a good ellipsis that sort of just trails off into nothingness and leaves the reader wondering can be wonderful. So can you copy down those two examples for me? It says, it was then that I saw it, ... And what happened next will haunt me forever, ... So can you copy down those two examples, please, and then write an example of your own about anything you like, any genre. How do you think you can use an ellipsis effectively? Okay, another tool that we have available to us then in terms of punctuation is the exclamation mark. Making sure we're saying exclamation, not explanation. If you exclaim something, if somebody exclaims, they're shouting it urgently or suddenly. So let's copy down that side heading then and the writing that it says underneath. So this says, using exclamation marks can make a phrase seem more urgent and intense. When used with speech, they can change the tone in which the reader reads it. Be careful, as overusing them can reduce their efficiency. Let's pause here then and get that copied into our books. If we have a look at the examples underneath them, we're having a look at the effect that an exclamation mark has on simple text. So, it moved turns into, it moved. It is suddenly more urgent, and the writer is showing the audience that this is meant to be something that perhaps happens suddenly, something that's meant to catch our attention. We've then got the mist began to swirl beneath my feet. Now that's a simple line of description until you add the exclamation mark. It says, the mist began to swirl beneath my feet. We now know that this mist swirling is something we need to pay attention to, something that's shocking, something that's urgent, something that's showing us that perhaps the person whose feet it was swirling around is shocked or nervous or worried in some way. So can you pause here then and write an example of your own? If you can think of more than one, then wonderful. Let's get them down in our books. Next then, we've got short sentences. Now obviously these are achieved through using full stops. We need to make sure that they make sense and that they do what they are intended to do. So again, let's pause here, let's copy down the side heading and the information underneath. It says, short sentences can create a sense of drama. They make the story seem as if it is broken into a rhythm like a heartbeat. They create haste and often a sense of urgency. Short sentences can be really effective in creating drama. They change the pace, they change the rhythm that the person's reading the text at. We can use them in really poignant moments to create pauses within a text. So they're really important, and if they're used well, they can be very effective. So we've looked at those 3 ways that we can create tension. Let's see then if you can use them effectively. So it says, rewrite the following paragraph using short sentences, exclamation marks and ellipsis to create tension. Now, of course, because you're rewriting something that's already been written, you are allowed to take out or add connectives to make sure that it makes sense. But I want this paragraph to be almost identical to what it is now, but using those 3 things we've just been through just to change it slightly, just to make it more tense. So this paragraph has a lot of potential to be very tense and very dramatic, but the person who wrote this obviously hasn't watched this video. So I'm going to read it and then we'll see if we can improve it. As Lily walked through the dark and lonely streets, she heard a distant murmur that made her feel uneasy. Quickly, she turned around to view her surroundings. The cold wind made her breath shudder in the crisp air. It was then that she heard it again, a soft whine that was increasing in intensity, and every time she turned to look back, it was getting closer and closer until it was upon her, swallowing her into a state of despair. She was bound by the ravenous hands of the night that blinded her from everything and everyone until she sank into the darkness with nothing more than a whimper. Okay, so the vocabulary and the description here is great. We've got quite vivid imagery. However, the punctuation is severely lacking in terms of creating tension. So, pause the video here. I want you to rewrite this paragraph, and I want you to include short sentences, exclamation marks, and 1, perhaps 2 a push, ellipsis to make sure that this is tense. Again, you might have to play around with the sentence structure, take out connectives, add the odd word here and there to make it grammatically correct. Then we're going to leave it there for today. So we've looked at some tools that we have to create tension. We've got punctuation. We've got the way that we don't give everything to the reader. Perhaps we as the reader know everything, and it's the characters within our story who don't quite know what's happening.